Good evening, and welcome to the Columbia County Democratic Candidates or Committee's Assembly Candidates Forum 2024. My name is Sam Hodge. I am the chair of the Columbia County Democrats and your host this evening. Tonight is going to be fun. I want you to imagine that the blank wall behind me is a fireplace and the blazer I'm wearing is a sweater, because this evening we'll be having 30-minute fireside chats with each of the four candidates running for assembly. Columbia County is split into two different assembly districts. We've got four candidates running. AD106 and AD107. Not sure which one you're in? Well, AD107 includes Kinderhook, Ghent, Stockport, Stuyvesant, and the Village of Chatham. The rest of Columbia County is in AD106. We will first hear from the candidates for AD106, our incumbent Assemblymember Didi Barrett, and then one of Hudson's supervisors, Claire Cousin. And then we'll hear from AD107 candidates Chloe Pierce and Kent Sopris. The order of speakers was determined alphabetically. Tonight's event is being recorded, and we will share a link to that recording following the event. Closed captioning is available, so please click on the closed caption box at the bottom of your screen to enable. All participants will be muted. Prior to tonight, the state and national committee prepared questions for this evening. In addition to those questions, you, the audience member, will be permitted to ask questions. Questions can be submitted for the candidates via the chat box. So send your questions to the account labeled Submit Questions Here. It's being manned by Todd Wolforth, the Hillsdale Democratic Committee Chair and our former communications chair. He will be combining and consolidating frequently asked questions, giving preference to the order in which the questions are received. Our hope is to cover as many topics as possible with each candidate. We will be alternating between questions that have been pre-prepared by the committee as well as questions submitted in the chat box. So, all right, it's time to start the fun. We're going to begin tonight with our esteemed assembly member, Didi Barrett. So let's bring to the fire Didi Barrett.
Sam.
Hey, Didi, how's it going?
It's going all right. Good to see you and glad to have FDR invoked with our fireside chat here.
Exactly. Well, maybe you could introduce yourself to folks who maybe aren't familiar with you and maybe also tell us where you're at right now.
Well, I'm in an undisclosed location in a library where I'm in Albany. I've been working all day today, but that's where I am, somewhere in Albany.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was elected to the Assembly in 2012 in a special election to fill the seat that had been vacated by Mark Molinaro, currently our Congress member. And I have had the most extraordinary and wonderful experience, and it's been the greatest honor to represent this really beautiful and extraordinary district in the Assembly. And I'm very proud of the many things that I've been able to get done. Right now I'm a little frustrated by having to raise money and do the kinds of campaign events in a primary when I'd really like to be fighting the Republicans and fighting for the issues that really are hanging in the balance our democracy in the country right now. But this is where we are, and I'm ready to come back and continue doing the work of the people of the 106 Assembly District next year to deliver all of the things that we've been able to do: the funding, the values, the issues that our people have cared so much about and shared with our office, and take it from there.
So I know that you've been involved in women's issues. You've been on the board for Planned Parenthood, and you've been advocating for the Hudson Valley for over a decade. What motivates you in running for re-election this cycle?
I thought obviously a lot about that. And it's, I feel like we've gotten a tremendous amount done. I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish and the education that we've been able to bring to our our majority conference about what's needed in the Hudson Valley. Hudson Valley is not New York City and Westchester, Long Island. It's definitely not the big cities along the corridors of Route 90. And we have special needs and we have special challenges around density and values and priorities here in our small towns and villages. And I've really been able to educate my colleagues and the speaker and to a certain extent the governor as well about those priorities. And there are four that I really want to make sure that I have continue to make a difference in. One of them obviously is housing. We were able to bring the $3 million to my district from the speaker to build affordable housing, both home ownership and rental. And that went to Habitat for Humanity of Columbia County and Hudson River Housing. And I want to be able to work with them to make sure that we continue to build on that. Climate, as the Assembly's chair of energy, I'm at the forefront of the changes that we want to see happen and the goals that we're trying to reach in the state. But the big challenge is how we get to those goals and how we pay for it. And being part of that conversation and those decisions is really important to me. I've always been passionate about reproductive rights and LGBTQ rights. Those are the issues that really brought me into politics and interest in running in the first place. As you may recall, when I first ran for the Senate in 2010, it was against Steve Saland, who had voted against marriage equality. And I think I can take a little bit of credit for turning his vote around, even though he didn't win the election. He did change his vote. So that's something that I'm very proud of. And then I continue to be really committed to mental health. It's an issue, mental health and addiction services, that I care very much about. I think we have a governor finally that's really interested in these issues. I've spoken to her personally about them over the years, and she's put some real money behind it in the state budget this time. And I think going forward, it's going to be, a new day for mental and behavioral health, and we have a real opportunity to be part of shaping that.
So you've now been there for over a decade, which is clear because you've been doing so much work, and you just articulated that. What do you think you bring to the table that make you an effective assembly member? Like, what are those skills?
I think every member really does it their way and does it differently. But for me personally, I think one of the major qualities is being a good listener. I really like to listen, and we do our diner stops all over the district. I like to hear what people on all sides are saying, and I don't necessarily agree with them, but I give them the respect of hearing and understanding where they're coming from, and that's always been part of it. I have a lot of people on the other side of the aisle who've always, said to me, "You're the only Democrat I vote for, because you come and you listen, and I really committed to giving the respect to everybody. I really believe that's an important part of being human, but particularly in this role, I have the experience, I think, and knowledge of the legislature to really act on my, on the goals that I'm trying to achieve and bring together the coalitions and the alliances, which I've done. I'm pretty much an outside the box thinker in so many issues, especially, as I said, related to an area like ours where, I'm representing a district from the town of Poughkeepsie up to New Lebanon, and I need to bring in colleagues from all over the state that don't represent districts that are like that. They're very urban, or they're just totally rural, or they're very suburban. And so being able to create outside the box solutions and bring allies along with me to get things done are some of the qualities that I bring to the mix.
I think that's a good transition to a question I think that's on every Democrat's mind is, the temperature in our politics right now is so high. There is so much divisiveness, rancor, and it's disappointing, and it's difficult to be in politics sometimes when that's the day-to-day. So how do you bridge that gap in your relationships in Albany? And what are your thoughts on how we can kind of move forward and try to be the America we're proud of again?
Well, first of all, I'm a mother of two young adults, I think, and I'm the first woman to represent this area, and the first and only Democrat represent this area in the Assembly until, we've had for a short time another senator, and then now Senator Hinchey. So pretty much I've had to work with peers who are Republicans in both the Senate and in the surrounding areas. And, I feel, again, that treating people with respect and listening to where they're coming from is really been a critical piece of how I do the work that I do. And I've had Republicans at every level of government, obviously the local, what the county government in Columbia County has been. I have had always a Dutchess County county executive that's a Republican, and as I said, my colleagues in state government too. So I think it's been, it's a personality dynamic, and I really do feel that listening and treating people with respect and finding the common ground is really important. I feel like with even now going to leading the challenges around our climate goals, it's really important that we bring the whole state with us and not have a kind of top-down, bullying approach, which is a lot of people feel like that's the way to go, that it's, sort of, you got to do it my way, or I'm just leaving. I'm not having a conversation with you. And I don't operate that way. I've never have. I never did as a parent. And I really think that's critical to building consensus. We're here to govern. We're not here to advocate. And that's a really significant part of how I think I've done my job. I've been an advocate. I've been up here before I was even thought about running for office as an advocate for Planned Parenthood. I was here to fight for reproductive rights before I had the honor of voting for the Reproductive Health Act. But that was a different role. And now representing a district of 140,000 people with very diverse points of view really requires a whole different approach, and one that I think I came to intuitively to a certain extent, but also have learned along the way.
So we just got a very difficult question for you. Do you support Biden or Trump?
I support Biden.
Exactly.
And Biden-Harris at this point, I think, I think they've been a good team, and we got to get them across the finish line. It is, it's so critical. So much is in the balance, and making sure that we have, that we have the campaign that we need, and people are focused on getting out there and voting.
Another question we received, could you explain the Clean Slate Act and why you supported it? And any other initiatives that you're also pushing for in the realm of criminal justice?
Well, there are several parole bills that I've signed on to, Fair and Timely, and the elder parole bill. I also supported the HALT Act. These are things that that I've long believed in. The Clean Slate Act, I supported the concept from the beginning, but the way it is in a lot of legislation is it takes time to actually create the bill that can pass, and the bill that was first introduced by advocates. And this happens in so many different areas where the bill is generated by a group of advocates that have a very clear point of view, which is great, and that's where they're coming from. But in order to get it passed and make it a law, it requires this process that we are engaged in Albany, and that is working on legislation. We are legislators. That's the job that we're elected to do. And that often requires sitting down with, again, different points of view and working together to find the parts that are going to fly in different people's districts, aren't going to fly in other people's districts, the things that people feel are something that they could accept this much, but they can't accept that much. And that legislation came with a lot of different complexities and different aspects to it. And I was, very happy to be part of the team. Catalina Cruz is somebody I work with a lot, and I was part of a lot of discussions. The other lawyers, I'm not a lawyer, but she is, and other lawyers worked with her on a lot of the details of that legislation, and we got a really good bill that we could move, and we did, and I was honored and proud to vote for it.
Earlier, you mentioned that, one of your priorities, since you've been elected, but then also looking to the future, is affordable housing. So could you speak to some of the successes that you have had, and what do you accomplish, or what do you hope to accomplish in this current term?
Well, certainly bringing the money back that the speaker helped me secure for, for creating really a model in Columbia County of how we do rural housing is one thing that I'm, very proud of. And I think it's a really important step I think Columbia County has really done a great job with the task force that Chris Brown has been leading. And that's, I've had multiple conversations with him. We've met regularly in Columbia County with the Hudson Housing Authority and the executive director there. And, we're looking to help in any number of ways. I think the other aspect of affordable housing in our region that we do a lot with is mobile homes, because for a lot of Columbia County, that is the affordable housing. And those residents have really been, for a long time, without any kind of rights and without any kind of protection. So in 2019, when we passed the last major housing bill that we passed, I was able to get the first policies supporting mobile home residents in that, along with the tenant protections that we passed for the rest of the state. And we've got a couple of other bills that we're working on right now around mobile home communities. Just today, actually, we had a discussion in our, with colleagues about discussing the housing package that we're hoping to put forward. And, it's complicated. It's a diverse state. Again, like I said, what flies in Manhattan doesn't even necessarily fly in Queens or in parts of Brooklyn or Staten Island. Same thing in Westchester. And then here we are in this, our beautiful Hudson Valley region with, with other kinds of challenges where, a 40-unit, 50-unit apartment building is not the solution for most of our areas. I would say not even for necessarily Hudson, but that would be the one place in Columbia County where we could imagine it, but not the rest. And we need the affordable housing everywhere. We're working with Habitat for Humanity on some legislation that would look at the way properties are assessed. So home ownership that's created by a not-for-profit in working in affordable housing should be able to stay affordable and not necessarily have to be assessed at the same rate as the rest of the town of Hillsdale or the town of Cloverick or wherever else the housing is being built.
Kind of pivoting to a different topic. Do you support the Medical Aid in Dying Act? And do you believe whether or not it would pass this session?
I do support it. I've always supported it. My father, when he passed away about 15 years ago, had been on dialysis, and he personally made the choice. That was not the kind of life that he wanted to live. He was a very active and engaged person with the family, with activities, with his, community. And, seeing him be able to make that choice, as heartbreaking and as difficult as it was for us, it had a level of empowerment too. And it made it clear to me that I know it's complicated, and I know there are, a lot of aspects to it that people are concerned with. And I certainly respect that point of view as well. But for me, it is something that I, would most definitely vote for. I think, again, I'm not sure where the numbers are, but, I've certainly hear a lot of support for it, but I hear a lot of concerns, well reasoned and thought out concerns as well. So it's, there's a lot of bills that are complicated. It's kind of frustrating when people assume that, oh, here's a bill with a great name, and so therefore you should be supporting it. And if you're not, somehow you're not a good person. But the bottom line is these bills are very complicated, and there's a lot of aspects to it, and the devil's in the details. And, reading a bill and understanding what all the ramifications are, talking it over with people, is a lot different than just signing on for everything that sounds good.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Another big issue in AD106 is, of course, farming and supporting small family farms. So could you speak to the work that you've done to bolster family farms and agricultural issues throughout our district?
Sure. I mean, this is, one of my passions. I've been on the ag committee from from when I first was elected, and it was one of the first committees that I told the then speaker that I said I definitely want to be on the ag committee, because exactly those reasons. Our small farmers and our mid-sized family farms, I believe, very much are the future of agriculture. The luxuries that we have of being close to a market, as our ag commissioner says, the biggest appetite in the world, New York City, and then the fortune that we have to have incredible soils and at the moment the right amount of rain, not necessarily all at the right time, but a lot of other parts of the country are struggling with drought and struggling with too much water, and we have we have a history, and this was the breadbasket of America during the days of Alexander Hamilton, right? So we have a history of and a legacy of agriculture. So working with that community and that base, I've passed legislation to protect farmland. That's important because a lot of our farmland is, even before the threat of say solar fields, the threat of housing developments was, very prominent in the Hudson Valley. And all of these things we need to figure out how to, to juxtapose. I've passed led legislation to ensure that our farmland stays in farming and that young farmers have access to them. I've worked a lot with our land conservancies, Columbia County Land Conservancy and Dutchess Land Conservancy to help make those matches for young farmers to literally put down roots in our area. And I actually, just last week, we had our hearing for the NCON committee for the budget, which includes the agriculture commissioner and the parks commissioner and all of my DEC and NYSERDA and the Public Service Commission, all that alphabet soup. But I actually asked the ag commissioner specifically what, because he's very involved in the national organizations of state ag commissioners. And I said, what are you guys doing about the farm bill to ensure that our farmers at our small and mid-sized farms are really getting the resources and the support, instead of those square states that, as I like to say, are growing, they're growing corn for gasoline that we're trying to get off of. So where does it make sense that the federal government is subsidizing them? And he said, if we get this passed, because this Congress has been holding things up, he said this could be the best farm bill ever for the state of New York and the kinds of farms that we have. So part of that has been just spreading the word and ensuring that people understand how important, and he's a big fan and a big advocate of New York. He's a farmer in New York and Schoharie County, so he completely gets it. And it's, I think we've given a lot of support for future farmers and young farmer education, and I'm thrilled with the number of kids, and particularly girls and young women, who are interested in, Future Farmers of America is a great leadership organization as well as agriculture, but talking to these kids, were here the other day, and some of them want to be environmental scientists and veterinarians, and not just the sort of traditional farmers, but plenty of them want to be the traditional farmers as well. So that's a great sign for the future of agriculture too.
Yeah, love that. What is your position or your thoughts about proposed budget cuts to the public school foundation aid?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a big mess, and we're fighting it tooth and nail. Multiple conversations with the speaker about how it's really disproportionately impacted our districts like mine, where there's so many rural districts that are small. I think this was a misguided idea by the governor to change the idea of changing the formula is right, and I think we do need to do that. But to change it in a way that that does this is just completely wrong, and we're not going to let that happen. Let that stay. So the process is she puts out her proposal, and then we each put in, the Senate and the Assembly, our own one houses in response to hers, and we're fighting hard to make sure that that money is at least returned to last year's levels, if not more.
To kind of stick in the realm of education, I suppose, a lot of kids go hungry. And I was wondering what your position was on free school lunches. And then also, groceries are expensive. So how can we help families that are facing food insecurity?
Well, I mean, I completely agree with you, and I think it's just so mind-boggling that here in the Hudson Valley, where we're surrounded by all this amazing farmland and these great farms that people are, and I know they have for a very long time, um, been food insecure. One of the things that we have done, just, and I know this is not Columbia County, but we've done plenty here too, but Dutchess Community College has a dorm, and they've always had troubles trying to figure out exactly what to do with it. And we have gotten them $150,000 every year for the last few years, specifically to help food insecure and housing insecure students. Happy to do something like that in Columbia County, but that is a program that they specifically have had embarked on, and we helped them start it and fund it. But we also, in the last cycle, had a $400,000 grant that we were able to distribute mostly in Columbia County to the Sylvia Center, the Long Table Harvest, and to the Columbia Green Community College specifically for their food insecure students and for their food bank. And we've been working with the Columbia County Recovery Kitchen because unfortunately they were not in the gateway, funds gateway, in order for us to be able to give them money. So we're on it. We're getting them all set up in that. And so we'll be able to help them access funding. And we've also been, I've been a great supporter in addition to, yes, I completely support the universal school lunch program, but also Nourish New York, which was a great program that I was part of starting in discussing in ways to get farmers to contribute food that would then go to people who are food insecure across the state. So working really New York to New York in feeding the people of New York State.
So we are nearing the end of our fabulous fireside chat. I know I'm getting warm. So in these last 5 minutes we have, I thought we could focus on climate change. So we got a couple of questions. One is, do you support the New York bottle bill? And then two, what policies are you advocating for to ensure that we meet the timeline established under the Climate Leadership Protection Act?
Well, the New York bottle bill is a bill that I basically support the intent of, but we don't have an assembly bill. It's a Senate bill. The assembly bill is been a different kind of bill. So, there's not a bill for me to really get behind at the moment. I know they're working on one, and they're working on making a bill that, that is the same as they say. So, but I would have no issue with it. Today, I actually voted in our Environmental Conservation Committee to support the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, which is something that our chair, Deborah Glick, has sponsored and worked hard to make sure that companies who are establishes a packaging reduction and recycling plan for these companies and make sure that it's enforced. The challenge often is that there's a lot of different interests in the farm community isn't always as supportive. There's work being done. And I think this particularly in the bottle bill, I believe I recall one of the issues was that the Farm Bureau had been against it and was looking for certain kinds of considerations, and that may be why we don't have a same as. I'm just sort of thinking back historically about this bill, but we also Deborah was saying that she literally, as a young assembly member, remembers sitting in that NCON committee 30 years ago and having a bill like this that was brought by the then chair and never moved. And so she's very passionate in making sure that bill is passed, and was happy to vote for that today. And just in terms of our climate goals and the bills that we're working on, we have a bill to increase the offshore wind goals so that we basically end up with more higher goals and more wind generation. We lost some ground this past year over several of the bills one bill that the governor vetoed because it was it really stepped on too much on the feet of a community that the pipeline was going to go, or the infrastructure was going to go through. I also co-sponsor the Climate Change Superfund Act, which is designed to generate funds from the worst polluters. And that's a really important tool in the toolbox. And my goal in all of this is to create as many different approaches and as many different tools as we can to get to our goals. But there's a lot of work still to do, and I hope I have the opportunity with all of your support to be there to get us across the finish line.
Well, in this final minute, I know that the ERA is something really important. So if you could just speak to that really quickly, and then we will have to say goodbye.
All right. Well, thank you. No, the ERA is we have voted twice in the legislature, in two consecutive legislatures, to pass it in New York State, and now it goes to the people. So it will be on the ballot in November to amend the New York State Constitution, and basically it creates a protected class that really expands who is covered from what is currently in the New York State Constitution, and it includes the LGBTQ community, disabled people, ethnic groups, and pregnant people, and their reproductive decisions. So if you're pregnant, or despite whatever the pregnancy outcomes are, you are a protected class. And I encourage everybody to turn that ballot over in November and be sure to vote yes.
Well, Didi, thank you very much for joining us tonight and all the work that you've done in the past and that you'll do this term. So thank you for taking the time to reintroduce yourself to Columbia County voters.
Thank you, Sam. It's been a pleasure and an honor working with everybody on the committee, and I appreciate all the people who are interested in hearing us tonight. So thank you.
All right. Next, we will bring to the stage, or I guess the fireplace, Supervisor from Hudson, Claire Cousin. Claire, good evening. How are you?
Good. How are you, Sam?
I'm very good. So why don't we start out with an introduction? So if you could tell all the folks on who maybe aren't familiar with you a little bit about yourself and your job as a supervisor in Hudson.
Sure. So my name is Claire Cousin. I am in my second term as a Columbia County Supervisor in the first ward for the city of Hudson. I am the co-founder of the Hudson Catskill Housing Coalition, which is a tenants' rights organization. I am a mother to 3 young people that will be future leaders in this district. And I am the vice chair of the Hudson Housing Authority. I come from a working class family that has lived in this district my entire life. My mom is a speech pathologist. My dad is a taxi driver and a veteran. And I'm very passionate about social justice and creating access and participating in the democratic process. So I'm here because I believe that this is a healthy part of democracy, being able to primary and go back and forth on what's important to folks in the district and have an open discussion and be respectful and, really dream of what the future of this district can look like and should look like.
I love what you said about your kids, future leaders. That's something that my sister says about my nephews, and so I really appreciate that. So I guess maybe how would you say that your experience as supervisor has prepared you, to seek this position as assembly member, will help you, should you be successful?
Sure. So I think that, 2 terms as a Board of Supervisors member has showed me what it takes to be a legislator on a smaller scale than assembly, obviously. But as my opponent mentioned, it's not just advocacy that's necessary, though I do have a background in advocacy, which is extremely important for me to bring to the assembly. And it is something that I've brought to my seat on the Board of Supervisors, and it's been productive. I understand that being a legislator is the bigger part of the job. And, in my role on the Board of Supervisors, we've been able to pass bipartisan legislation. We got a resolution passed in support of clean slate, and that was difficult for our county. Historically, our county is a Republican run, has a Republican majority at the county level, and being able to have an open discussion with everybody on the Board of Supervisors, have them understand the language of the legislation as it was, and get that level of support says a lot about, the type of leader that I plan to be, and the type of conversations that I'm willing to have, no matter how difficult they are. And I did that because, the advocate in me heard what my constituents said that they wanted to see passed, and we wanted the state to know that this is something that is really important in our district, and that, we have to really look at the language, and we have to educate people on what the language is saying, so that folks do understand that there was a misconception on clean slate specifically. People thought that it was a public safety bill, and it really wasn't. It was about economic justice. It was about creating opportunities and access to things, basic needs like housing and education, and being able to start over and create a new future for yourself. And that was the conversation that was had. And when you use a people first approach to the conversations, people listen and they can hear you.
Well, I think that's a good transition. So clean slate passed in 2023. What are your priorities going to be for criminal justice reform, moving forward, should you be successful and be serving next year?
Sure. So elderly parole, elderly parole, I'm sorry, and fair and timely parole are two very important bills. Working with advocates, again, is extremely important. Vocal New York have been integral in leading the fight. And, those are the folks that we need to be listening to, because they are led by directly impacted constituents. Though there may not be a chapter in our district, there's still room on the state level for folks from different districts to do the work on behalf of the entire state. And there are people who are affected by bills like this. And when we talk about criminal justice reform, again, it's about touching back to the district and making sure that folks understand the ways in which voting on things that don't necessarily have the biggest impact on the district affect the beauty of the entire state, and how we can have a better democracy across the state by representing the interests of other folks. And one of the things that is important to consider in this unique district is that we are surrounded by prisons in Columbia County, 6 to be exact. There is an entire economy that exists around us. And there are people who have lived here their entire lives that work in these facilities, but there are more people who have been affected by these facilities and affected by the harsh policing and the judicial system that aims to harm people in this way. And there's room to have deeper conversations on how we can, seek progressive change in some of those areas. So those are two of the bills that I plan to support. I'm glad to hear that Didi is supporting them. That's important legislation to be supported.
What would you say, of every issue, what are your top 2 or 3 priorities should you be our next assembly member?
Housing, climate, and affordability. I'll say 3 because they all go hand in hand for me. But I think it's important to understand that thinking outside of the box means really digging deep into the issues that people are having. When I say housing, I'm not just talking about developing new housing. I'm talking about reimagining what it means to have truly affordable housing and helping people understand the entire spectrum that exists when we talk about affordable housing. Yes, we need more affordable housing, especially in rural districts, and that's why I support building green social housing. I think that that's something that a lot of people need more education on to be able to envision it, but it's something that is a really progressive kind of housing. But also, you know, we have to talk about the fact that homeowners need to be included in the affordable housing conversation, as well as tenants. We need to support tenant protections. People that already live in housing need to be able to afford their housing. There's a misconception when we say affordable housing, and people automatically think of subsidized housing. Every conversation around affordable housing is not trying to build, you know, 40 and 50 unit buildings. There are people who, you know, don't want to be homeowners and want to be renters and want to live in communities. And we need to be able to secure land for projects to come down the pipeline in the future and not oversaturate our county with new development. When I think about climate, you know, it's about building public renewables. It's about making sure that people can afford their utilities. It's about making sure that we're not pumping more pollution into this area for decades to come. It's not signing on to legislation that does exactly that. When we're talking about affordability, we're making sure that people have access to healthcare. We're making sure that, again, they can afford their utilities, that they have a living wage that matches the inflation. We're making sure that people that live in upstate New York are not getting a lower minimum wage than people that live downstate. And to get some of these things done, you absolutely need an advocate. You need somebody that is living in these issues on a regular basis, which I am, and that has firsthand experience and is bringing that passion to Albany, because it's lobbying your fellow colleagues. It's letting them know that this is important to the people in my district. This is what they are actively living. I need you to sign on to this with me. It is about signing on and then doing the work. You understand the bill, you work on the language, you get the best version of the bill you can, and you ask for bigger, you ask for big, and you go to where you need to go to get it across the line. But it absolutely takes an advocate to get things done.
Well, I want to take each one of those priorities in turn. We got a couple of questions related to affordable housing. The first one says, in 2021, you spoke in support of the pilot program for Galvin's Depot District project in Hudson. In your questionnaire, you indicate that you do not support pilot programs or the 421A program. Can you explain what these programs are and how they affect Hudson Valley housing prices?
Sure. So when the Galvin project was proposed, one of the difficult spots that we were in as a county and a city was that there was almost no conversation around development. And when you have a super developer that has come into your community, has taken over housing resources, which is one of the only companies outside of the Housing Authority and Section 8 that provide affordable housing, and is offering to build new housing when you know that you need housing, and you have a mayor dedicated to building affordable housing, he needed support. And as a supervisor, that was my job. You know, we also were doing advocacy alongside saying yes to the pilot program to organize community members in asking for community benefit agreements, which I also strongly believe in. Unfortunately, CBAs don't come with a ton of teeth. And that is something that we were trying to figure out as a local community. How can we get the most accountable kind of a CBA so that community members' needs and wants were accounted for by developers when they come into our communities to create the least amount of harm. In my questionnaire, I did say that I don't support pilot programs because through that process, I learned that if you don't have something that holds developers accountable, they can do harm, and they do live on their own timeline. And they don't take into consideration the community first, and they are profit focused. And that was a lesson that I had to learn. And unfortunately, it was a hard lesson, but there's still affordable housing units that are coming online. And it was a lesson for other folks in the city also. And I think that the next project was a better version, and the conversation changed. And at the city level, there were there's a rubric now where they can, developers have to at least consider the community's needs, and they're graded based on how they're going to meet this criteria. And I think that that's important in the conversation. So yeah.
And then this is another question about your questionnaire. In it, you talk about one of your successes was securing $250,000 for affordable housing. Could you just expand about how you got that money and where the money is being spent?
Sure. So the Housing Task Force, I'm on the second version of the Housing Task Force, which is just not the advisory committee, but just it's a lower level of that. So we just give our opinion, but securing $250,000 as a team, it's about sharing the experience of what the constituents need. And there were many conversations in Democratic caucus where we talked about how we wanted the ARPA money to be spent. And that was some of the conversation around getting the money secured. Again, another huge part of my role as the Board of Supervisors, I am the first Black woman elected to the Board of Supervisors, and I have a unique experience. I've gone through multiple services that the county provides, including social services. I've had to try to find housing in the county, and that's the unique perspective that I've brought to the conversation. And I truly believe that that has helped them decide how they want to spend the money. Because also as a housing advocate and co-founder of a housing coalition, there's a unique perspective in the conversation that doesn't live on the Board of Supervisors at the moment.
Well, why don't we talk about the second priority that you mentioned, climate change and the environment? What policies would you advocate for to meet the timeline that's been established in the Climate Leadership Protection Act?
Sure. So, I think that right now the position that the state is in is absolutely to meet the climate goals. My job is to advocate for things that help get those climate goals over the finish line, and not support bills or, introduce bills that are going to take us backwards. And unfortunately, that's not the case in some of the conversations that are happening in Albany right now. And, I believe that also being a progressive candidate and joining a progressive block of candidates is another really important conversation in getting our climate goals accomplished. There's a lot of things that people didn't think would be able to happen around climate because it just seemed too utopian. And Sarah Hanna in the district next door to us proved that, going up against an incumbent who has gotten comfortable in their position helps get policy passed. In her first term, she helped pass build public renewables. And I think that it's really important to consider that when we're talking to voters and we're thinking about climate change. Also, it's important to consider the fact that utility bills are completely unaffordable. We need to make sure that our constituents are understanding and are educated on the fact that they have rights, and thinking about climate change in a way that directly affects their pocketbooks and seems like there is a tangible solution on the table will create support from our constituents. So, I think helping join the caucus, the climate caucus, as I like to call it, and making sure that we're meeting our climate goals and not taking it backwards is where I stand on the climate goals right now. I think we have a really solid set of bills in the assembly right now around climate, and I just want to go in and support.
Well, perhaps I'm editorializing, but you and I are in our 30s, and this is our future we're talking about, so it's very important. So this is another question that we received. So it says, many of the programs in your platform in your questionnaire require enormous funding. You quantified universal child care at $5 billion. How do you plan to secure funds for this and other priorities?
It's actually a very simple solution for me. I think that we need to tax the billionaires. I think that we need to fund these programs by putting the responsibility on, the folks that are causing some of the harm. And I plan to support the bills that tax the rich.
Another question, and this kind of goes to, I think, that third major topic that you brought up, which is affordability in general. What policies would you support to help families that are facing food insecurity?
I think first and foremost, we need to make sure that people have a livable wage. And like I said before, our living wage should not be less than New York City's. I think that inflation affects us just as much as it affects New York City. Our rents are rising, food is just as expensive, if not more expensive. I think, you know, people need to be able to afford to live in our district, especially young families. We are seeing the population of our county increase because young families cannot survive here. And yeah, I think living wages is number one. And I also think that supporting small farmers is another really important thing. And also youth programming. Funding youth programming for, you know, sustainable farms is something that I participated in when I worked at Kite's Nest, which is one of the first places that I created programming. I ran a social justice youth program called the Social Justice Leadership Academy. And now they have a Roots and Rebels program where they teach people, they teach young people about just putting their hands in the land and really falling in love with gardening and farming again, especially in the city of Hudson. There is, excuse me, there's land to be loved on. And I think that the more that we're thinking about cultivating and farming, the more sustainable it will be for people to really imagine themselves using this beautiful rural district that we have access to.
And I have to ask the same question. Do you support Joe Biden or Donald Trump?
Joe Biden.
All right. Next question. So Columbia Memorial, it's the only hospital in Columbia County, and it's struggling. So how do we bolster hospitals like Columbia Memorial and other rural hospitals throughout the state?
Yeah, I really struggle with this one because again, being a Hudson resident my whole life, watching the state of Columbia Memorial has been extremely hard. The closing of the maternity ward, where I delivered one of my children and then had to go to Albany for the rest, was really, it brought it to reality that, you know, this hospital is not exempt from the crisis that our country is facing. And I think that, again, it is about taxing the rich and making sure that we are sending more funding down for Medicaid reimbursement to these rural hospitals. And again, advocacy, safe staffing in these hospitals is really important. Making sure that, you know, unions hear from their constituents, which I think is another really important fact. But it's really about making sure that they have the funding that they need to keep these hospitals open and then the clinics throughout the district, right? It's not just the hospital. There are smaller vital clinics throughout the district that serve the more rural parts of our district. And we need advocates in Albany that are going to talk about how impactful these different localities are for the folks of this district.
What policies would you support to combat gun violence and the trafficking of illegal guns?
I don't have any policies off the top of my head, but I did work in domestic violence, and I understand the importance of making sure that offenders do not have access to guns. I don't know the name of that bill, but I know that there is a bill in the assembly that supports that same sentiment. And also, you know, safe harboring of guns is really important. I have 3 children, like I said. My son is autistic, and it's really hard to keep their mind off of social media and the influences of the world. And, you know, it's not just illegal guns. It's also people that may not be safely putting their guns away, that are also very dangerous. And I think when we're thinking about gun control, we have to be really pragmatic about it. And we have to think about the reality of what guns do and how dangerous they can be, and trust that folks that have their gun license are they're responsible gun owners. So when we're having the tough conversations, I believe that these are folks that want to do the right thing because they've already taken all of the steps that are necessary to be able to safely carry their guns, and be able to use their guns. And for whatever reason that they need their guns, they've already proven that they're committed to the process. And if we have to add a couple steps, I think that I'm a good person to have some of the conversations around how we can meet in the middle and add some of those extra protections to make sure that as many people as possible remain safe and feel comfortable, with people being able to have access to their guns.
We got another question. It's fairly broad. So it's a little bit of a two-parter. So how will you work to support businesses and economic development in AD106? And then I think a second related question is how do we attract people to come move to Columbia County, especially young folks ready to work and start families and put kids in schools up here and be part of our community?
Yeah, so I sit on the Economic Development Committee for Columbia County Board of Supervisors. And one of the conversations that I've been really invigorated by is around skilling the gap. So there's a gap in employment since the pandemic. And this is where people like myself who are young enough to be participating in some of the new wave jobs that are coming, but old enough to know that, it takes a certain level of creativity and realistic thinking to bring these things to fruition. So I'm committed to having the conversation and helping people understand that envisioning things is not utopian, and that that's a missing part in creating real solutions to the future of this district, is inviting people into the room and I want to hold town halls and have deeper conversations and take people's visions and ideas and turn them into solutions. I think that, we have to think of alternatives to education. I think that, SUNYs are super important, and they are the heart of this district. To be able to have access to community college is huge, but there's an entire population of people that college is just not for them. And we need to create the workforce that people are looking for. We have one hospital that is not doing so good. Nursing is not the only career that women want to go into anymore. And there's people that should be learning how to install solar panels. There's people that should be learning how to run online businesses. There's people that should be creating online content and learning how to be interior design. Interior designers and do website design and things like that also. Because we're developing this community, we're growing this community. I think that funding for Questar to expand is a conversation that we've had, but also we need universal childcare, because we can't ask people to go to work and, fill this gap that we have in employment if there's no place that is affordable for them to send their kids all day. I was paying $400 a week for my two youngest children to go to daycare. That's an entire salary upstate New York. That is my entire check. And then you factor in everything else. It just wasn't affordable. And people are making the choice to raise their family and figure it out over working. And we just shouldn't have that be a choice that people have to make.
How do we get young people to vote? What will you do as a candidate, and then potentially as our next assembly member, to bring young people, working class, people of color out to the polls to support the ideals that you've articulated?
I think one of the most important things that has been exciting to people in this race is that, there is, whether it's accepted or not, a primary exists, right? And it exists for a reason. It exists because people want to see change. And people also want to see an expiration date. And I think that that should be embraced. I think that we should have the conversation around stepping into leadership, but we should also have the conversation about what's next, who's next, who are we pouring into? One of the things about being a Democrat that I find extremely beautiful is the inspiration that I get from leaders like Cori Bush and AOC and Sarah Hanna and other local leaders, I mean, of color and national leaders of color that are working class people that have lived experience, that are stepping into these positions with passion, and they're doing real work. They're getting things done, and they're changing the face of this nation, and they're changing what's possible to young people like myself. And I think that people are invigorated by seeing somebody step into the arena with that same sentiment. Because win, lose, or draw at the end of this primary will have done exactly what a primary is supposed to do. It will have given the district the best version of whoever the legislator is, and that's what this district deserves. And that's the entire goal of running a primary.
How should New York balance the needs of undocumented persons and asylum seekers versus broader immigration concerns?
Yeah, I think everybody should feel welcome. I think we need to expand. The state should be taking care of folks that come here seeking asylum in the sense of, people deserve healthcare, people deserve to be able to eat, they deserve to be able to find housing. And I think that that's something that as Democrats, we fundamentally believe, and we need to find as many solutions as possible to make it not so difficult for folks to become legal citizens.
We only have a minute or two left. So I'm going to ask you a similar question that I asked Assemblymember Barrett. It's a difficult time in our politics. There's a lot of divisiveness. People aren't friends with their neighbors. So, what do you think is the cure? How are you going to be part of it?
I truly believe that we have more in common than we have differences. And a listening ear is an ear of compassion, and it's being able to find similarities in your stories. And it's being understanding. It's not just listening so that you can do something with what somebody's saying, but it's listening because you truly care. And I've found great solace in having conversations with people just around this race in general. I think it's already bringing people together because there's a sense of hope in what this race is doing compared to what is happening in the nation. There's room for change that doesn't have to create harm. Change is a beautiful thing, and it doesn't have to happen immediately. And if it doesn't happen immediately, that doesn't mean that we're not committed to still working towards the best kind of climate that we can have. I think that, this country is in a really tough spot, but there's still so much hope because we are the country that we are. And when we have deeper conversations and we're being compassionate to one another, we find common ground and we remember why we get up every day and do the things that we do. And I think that really creates a sense of community and reminds people that, we're all people just trying to figure it out.
Well, on that positive note, Claire, it has been a pleasure chatting with you tonight. The fire is roaring, so we will let you have the rest of your evening. But thank you very much for coming and speaking to Columbia County Democrats.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. So now we finished Assembly District 106. So we are going to move to Assembly District 107. And just as a reminder, 107 includes the towns of Kinderhook, Stockport, Stuyvesant, Ghent, and the Village of Chatham. Every other town is in AD106. So with that in mind, let's bring our first candidate for AD107 to the stage, or I guess the fireplace, Chloe Pierce. Chloe, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's nice to see you, Sam.
Yes. So why don't you introduce yourself to Columbia County Democrats?
Sure, I'd love to. First and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you on the call for this opportunity and for taking the time to have these conversations. I really appreciate it. So again, my name is Chloe Pierce, and I am a candidate for AD107. Despite my age, I have 2 decades of experience personally and professionally as an advocate in government affairs and working on various campaigns each cycle. I have a decade of professional experience in this field, besides 2 summer semesters I spent as an adjunct professor in Schenectady. And to win the seat, we need someone to energize the voter base in general, but specifically the young voter base, as we just talked about. Young people, I think, are feeling a lot of distrust in both parties, and they want to fight against the idea of the political machine. And that's something that I can relate to and want to have conversations about. And women candidates tend to historically do better with energizing younger voters, so I'm confident in my ability to do that. And the district is also 59% female. So again, who better to energize that base than a woman, especially with ERA on the ballot this year. And I also draw a lot of inspiration from successful current Democratic members who were near my age or even younger when they were elected. So Senator Hinchy locally, Senator Gonzalez, as well as Assembly members Berger, Anderson, and then former Assembly member, now Senator Skoufis. But beyond my ability and qualifications to do the job, I also have roots in every part of this county. So I've spent my whole life as a resident of Albany County. My mom is from Washington County with my family, some of my family still there. My dad's from Rensselaer County with some family still there. And then I have close friends that are now chosen family in Columbia County, Ghent specifically. In this district, and the needs of the district are deeply important to me and something I've spent my whole life discussing and experiencing. But beyond those personal experiences, I also have a lot of knowledge in areas that matter to this district. So universal school meals is a huge priority for a variety of reasons, including affordability, food insecurity, and I was working on it today, as a matter of fact, trying to get an increase in the budget to make it fully universal. So I like to think I played an instrumental role in getting the historic $134 million investment last year that gave more than half our schools free healthy meals. But beyond that, clean energy is also a huge priority across the state, but especially for this area. And again, just today, I was discussing different clean energy-based legislation with stakeholders and ways we can work together to meet mandated clean energy goals responsibly and with an emphasis on affordability as well. And part of the CLCPA is specifically designed to address not just affordability, but also disadvantaged communities to make sure everyone has access and can benefit from our state's transition to clean energy, which is something that's really important to me. But beyond knowing issue areas, I'm really immersed in the communities of the district as well. And a major part of my platform is being grassroots, both in terms of fundraising and in terms of campaigning. And when I first started this journey, I said to my mom, I'm going to knock each and every door in this whole district. And she said, honey, that is so laudable, but it just won't happen. So she brought me back down to reality a little bit in that way. But I still stand by that intent. I want to connect and have as many face-to-face conversations as I can, or face-to-face on Zoom. And I just want to connect with as many people as possible, not just people who are Dems or agree with my platform areas, but everyone I possibly can, because the job as a representative is to advocate for everyone in the community to the best of my ability, and not just people who vote for me. And I'm also a firm believer of finding common ground and making common sense decisions that support the common good and our common interests. And through my work, I've seen firsthand how many times having open-minded, transparent conversations can make two people realize they have common goals or more in common interests than they previously realized. And that's the kind of elected official I want to work to be. And that has been one of the benefits of being in this race as early as I was, is that I've been able to really meet a lot of people across all 4 counties and get a better sense of their needs and interests through these conversations. So like I said, I live in Albany County, so my day-to-day life can look really different than someone else, like in Columbia County, for example. But I want to fight for Columbia County just as hard as the other counties, even if the challenges and needs are different from what I personally experience. And part of my ability to do that comes from having conversations with as many people as possible across the spectrum. And having been a dedicated candidate for the last 6 months, and then talking about wanting to run for the 6 months prior to that, I've talked to a lot of people in the district and become even more committed to this race and to beating the incumbent come November, in order to deliver real results for these communities. And I believe that dedication is what has gotten me to the point I am now, where I have received 2 national endorsements, including one that just dropped today, for a group that's aimed at supporting women's issues and LGBTQ issues. And I have some interviews for additional ones coming up as well. And I really want to be the person that represents our communities in the assembly, working beside members that I already have wonderful working and personal relationships with. And I strongly believe I'm the right person to win this seat in November, and I look forward to having conversations about it. Thank you again.
No, that's great. My next question to you was going to be, why are you running? But you just gave a
Sorry, sorry, I jumped ahead.
No, it's great. Well, you referenced some of your priorities, but why don't we flush that out? So, should you be the next assembly member taking out a Republican in AD107? What are the 2 or 3 top priorities you're going to have?
Sure. So affordability is a big one, as well as focusing on clean energy in the environment and how to have advancements in clean energy technology without overburdening our agriculture, and land conservation efforts. And then also I would say healthcare is another big one as well.
We just got a question about climate change. So having rigorous and goals and targets is an important component of implementing that historic Climate Leadership Act. So do you think it's the right time to negotiate or change the targets in that legislation, or do you think we should push forward, push harder, and not give ground on these important goals?
So I think that it's important to continue on the track that we are. But if we don't make further investments in these technologies, we won't meet those goals. I think the goals when they were first decided were reasonable, but we've run into some hiccups along the way in terms of increasing costs, difficulties with the permitting process and siting. So I think while they're large goals to me, if we double down on our efforts and we make some of the permitting things easier, and we really make further investments in this technology base, I think that those goals are attainable. But there's a lot of work to do, of course, and that's why there's dozens of bills around this centered on trying to meet those goals.
What policies would you advocate for to support small scale and family farms, and then also incentivize sustainable organic farming?
Sure. I think that agriculture obviously is a essential part of our economy. And I think that there's a lot of grant opportunities that we can tap into, and in initiatives that are happening across the state, one of which is out of Cornell, and it's helping farmers transition to sustainable agriculture. And I believe that the state has a responsibility to help make those goals happen, and provide grant opportunities for individuals looking to make that sustainable transition. And then I also believe one of the bills that I work on currently is the Good Food New York bill, which would alter municipal law in terms of food procurement. And that would really incentivize local farmers, help them stay in business, help them get larger contracts to maybe even expand, and make sure that we are not overburdening our farmers, and really investing in that part of our economy.
So one of the priorities that you mentioned just a moment ago was about affordability. So why don't we talk about affordable housing? What are different ways that we can promote affordable housing in rural communities? How do we tackle this problem?
Sure. So as someone who is currently looking for a home, I know just how difficult it can be in the housing market to find something affordable. But also I'm currently a renter and I know how unaffordable that process can be as well. So one of the things that I want to look into as a legislator is the Housing Access Voucher Program, which is currently co-sponsored by Assemblymember Barrett and Senator Hinchey. And that would look to address secure and affordable housing for vulnerable populations, which would help reduce issues of homelessness and instability in that way. But I also think that needs to be expanded to look into first-time home buyer incentives and agricultural and USDA grants, and also beyond just increasing opportunities to have those financial assistance methods. I think we need to increase education about what's available. So currently, again, looking for a house, and there are so many resources I didn't know existed. And I think that's something that goes across the spectrum of issue area, making sure people know what's available to them, how to access it, and assisting people with accessing those resources as well.
Well, best wishes in your housing search.
Thank you.
Tough time, I can tell you that. Similar in the same vein of affordability is, families facing food insecurity. And this is something I spoke to the AD106 candidates about. So how can we help these families that are struggling to put food on their tables, or seniors who are also struggling, to buy their groceries? What's the solution?
Sure. So I think it, like everything we're talking about, everything comes down to a multifaceted approach, and something that we talk about all the different sectors, private, public, what state can do, tapping into federal dollars. I think it's an issue that requires a multifaceted approach. One of them, again, in terms of food insecurity, is healthy school meals for all. So that's something that I talk about with affordability as well, because what it costs the state is significantly less than what it would cost these families. So to provide free breakfast and lunch, that's about 40 meals a month for these students, it saves families about $150 per child per month. And that's significant, especially when you're struggling to make ends meet. And these are healthy meals too, which we know, of course, are more expensive than some of the unhealthy options. So I think that really investing and making that fully universal will make a big difference in fighting food insecurity. And also too, when I was an adjunct professor at Schenectady Community College, it was in a high school and college program. So the students that I dealt with were juniors and seniors from Schenectady High School. And it was a really holistic program that aimed to not just give students college credit and experience and strengthen their educational skills, but it also touched on the other areas that they were struggling in, which was, for a lot of them, food insecurity. And they partnered with local food pantries and had food available. They provided breakfast and lunch, but they also had food that they could take home to make sure that when they left at the end of the day, like they had food for their siblings if they weren't part of the program, and for their families if they were struggling. So I think that experience lends itself nicely to combating this issue for me personally, where I want to really see investments in our local food pantries and that community approach to make sure that people feel supported. And again, they know about resources available to them. And then that investment also extends to our seniors. So my great grandmother was part of like Meals on Wheels and programs like that, and investing in programs like that I think are really important, not just for seniors who are struggling financially, but also who have mobility issues and transportation issues, because access to food shouldn't be dependent on having a car or something like that. So I think it definitely needs to be a collaboration across sectors and a multifaceted approach.
So Columbia Memorial Hospital is located in Hudson, that's AD106, but it services people who live in AD107 as well. And then AD107 incorporates, Rensselaer County and Washington County, also rural communities.
Yes.
So how can we help these hospitals, one, keep them going, two, nurse shortages and all the other woes that these hospitals are experiencing? What can you do as our next assembly member to help that,
Sure.
or to help them?
Yeah. So one of the clients I currently advocate for is the New York State nurses. And so I have some experience in a variety of healthcare policies, some of which we talked about in the previous conversation for 106. Safe staffing is a big one, and prioritizing people entering the workforce for hospitals and healthcare centers, but not just anywhere, but specifically rural areas where there are staffing shortages, whether that be looking into incentives for enhancing loan forgiveness programs for people who are committed to being in rural areas, such as this hospital, and also looking into, I would say, building out the infrastructure to attract people to this area, which is, again, another question that was on the questionnaire about attracting people to the area. And I think when we have investments in our education and in our infrastructure, broadband, that holistic approach, again, is going to be attractive to people to come to this area for jobs. Again, nurses being one of those jobs. And then also we need to really, again, look at what funding is available through the state. And I know Department of Health has offerings through the Rural Healthcare Access Development Program. So perhaps, working with local and municipal leaders to access those grants, consider looking at different rural support systems that exist in the state and encouraging investments in those further, as well as an assembly member.
We got another question. This is again, what is your position on that bigger, better bottle bill? And then also, what is your position on the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act?
Sure. So one of the issue areas I work on really pretty much daily at my current job is in the whole clean energy space, and that's encompassing of, like we talked about, like offshore wind, solar, EVs, and the bottle bill is part of that. And like Assemblymember Barrett said, there isn't a same as that exists for me to say I wholly support, but I completely support the intent. I think that we need to expand the containers that are included in that and increase the 10 cent up to 10 cents instead of 5. And really encourage people to recycle and have, steps toward a circular economy in that way, where our products are re-envisioned and repurposed into other things and recycling is prioritized. And then I also think that, for your second part of the question, that there is a responsibility on producers to have plans in place on how to recycle things such as mattresses and packaging, and just really be proactive in that sense. And it's similar to how I feel about the Make Polluters Pay bill, for example, that taxpayers and lower income, middle class people should not be burdened to make up for things that are like climate change impacts and things that are plaguing our community. So for the Make Polluters Pay, it's mega polluters. It's not falling, it shouldn't fall on the shoulders of average people. And I feel the same way in terms of these companies that are producing things.
Do you support Biden or Trump?
I am pro-Biden. As a young person, I feel inclined to say that I do wish that there were younger options, but I support Biden-Harris. I think they have done a very good job, especially given what they were handed. I think they've done a very good job thus far.
All right. I'm shocked by all these answers on who people support for president. What steps, switching to a more serious topic, what steps would you take to make treating addiction a funding priority? And how would you support or advocate for families who are impacted by addiction?
Sure. So again, that is an issue area that I cover currently as an advocate. And I think that we need to make some major investments in terms of treatment centers, make investments in providers, and have additional resources available to people that not only struggle with addiction, but are in recovery, and then their families as well, because it should be a holistic approach in that way. And I also think that we need to have increased collaboration with agencies like the Office of Addiction Services and Supports and community-based organizations. So we know not just at the state level what people are facing, but directly in these communities, working together with local groups to make sure that we're meeting those needs. And I also think it's important to do early intervention programs in terms of our kids and our youth. And we need to make sure that we have supportive services for them as well to keep them on the path of success, and help if they're struggling in that way at a younger age too. And that includes community organizations, as well as doing educational programs that are happening in the school. So I think that's a funding area that we can look at as well. And a lot of it comes down to having candid conversations, open dialogue, to reduce some of that stigma, because I think sometimes that stigma prevents people from accessing resources. And often, like we talked about with other things like affordability, people don't always know what's available to them. And I think it's important to have that educational piece as well, so people know what they can access, the support they have, what families know that they have available to them, and just really be an advocate for increased funding, and also increasing our training programs, right? So the average person knows how to administer Narcan, have Narcan in our schools. We have defibrillators, we have different life-saving supports in that way. Why not Narcan as well? Especially as it's something that's really plaguing our communities, and especially in 107, there's a lot of issues in that area, and I would love to be a strong advocate for them in the Assembly.
What is your position on a ban of menthol cigarettes and other flavored tobacco products?
So that is something that I am currently researching, and would love to have really open conversations on both sides, to have a stronger position on that. I think we need to work to keep tobacco out of the hands of our kids. Absolutely. I think that that's something that people across the board agree on. But I am still in the process of doing research. And again, that's who I want to be as an assembly member. It's impossible to know everything about everything, no matter how hard we try. And I want to have open conversations. I want to research. I want to learn. I want to collaborate with our local experts, and community groups across the board. And I think that that's a strength that we can look for in our members, and it's something that I really hope to emulate.
The Supreme Court gutted New York State's gun control laws. So what policies would you support to curb and combat gun violence, and then also address illegal gun trafficking?
Sure. I agree with some of the conversations we had for 106, that it's not just about illegal guns. Obviously, that's a major concern, but guns in general, I think we really need common sense gun control. I come from a family of hunters on my dad's side, and they were very responsible gun owners, and they didn't mind having to go through an extensive permitting process to get those guns. And I think that's something that we need to focus on, closing loopholes, making it so guns aren't in the hands of people who have domestic violence history, people who have orders of protection against them, people with mental health illnesses, and out of the hands of our kids as well. So I think it really comes down to tightening up the permitting process, closing those loopholes, and doing the necessary in-depth background checks that it takes. Again, it really comes down to common sense gun control there.
We touched on this a little bit when we talked about rural healthcare and supporting hospitals like Columbia Memorial, but could you touch on maybe some of the policy solutions that you envision to help our rural communities, especially seniors who are in healthcare deserts, where they need assistance? In a lot of places, there aren't assisted living facilities. So how can we work to solve those concerns in rural areas?
Sure. So, one of the things that I read about while researching for the questionnaire was programs that exist specifically for rural transportation, and addressing the needs of seniors. So I know that there's one that exists in Kinderhook that takes people to and from different shopping areas, businesses, pharmacies, things like that. And I think programs like that should be really expanded, and should include transportation for seniors as well. So I think that that's, whether it be a healthcare desert or a food desert, because I know that's something that this issue faces, even in the city of Rensselaer, there's a food desert in that way. So I think helping with rural transportation is going to make a big difference in terms of accessing healthcare. And again, this is something that Rensselaer County has to face as well, with having only one birthing center that is at risk of closure. So I think expanding those community programs to allow, if not free, very, very affordable rates of transportation for our seniors and other individuals to access those healthcare services. And also, again, tap into whatever available funding there is through the state government, through federal dollars, expanding grants that are available to help fund these programs. And I will advocate as hard as possible for all of those things.
What role should solar farms and other clean energy technologies have in our rural communities? There were concerns raised about a project in AD106, how it was affecting people's view shed, among other issues. So what do you see our responsibility in expanding solar farms and our capacities with clean energy technology in rural areas?
So I think that there needs to be a lot of collaboration here, right? Like it can't just be a decision made by just solar or just agriculture. It needs to be a very cross-sector conversation, because we need to increase our clean energy technologies without overburdening agriculture or, closing farms because we're making a solar farm and reducing crop production and things like that. So I think there's a lot of very interesting technologies that we can research, one of which is through, again, Cornell, agrivoltaics, which is kind of like marrying the two things. So it's having raised solar panels. Typically, they're at a certain height, but in order to do agrivoltaics, they would raise it significantly. So that way you can have crops near the solar fields and it doesn't block the light from reaching the crops. You can have sheep grazing around the solar panels. And I think technology like that is really promising to help us meet our clean energy goals while making sure our farms stay open and operational and we're not overburdening farmers. And I think that in terms of in this district, it's important. There's a lot of agriculture, right? And I know people are nervous about solar energy. Hoosick actually had a moratorium on solars recently. So it's a district-wide thing, statewide, nationwide, trying to meet climate energy goals and transitioning over into this burgeoning field. And I think looking at ways that we can collaborate and share space is really important in our rural communities, especially.
Well, you're bringing a wealth of knowledge to this race. We're running short on time, so I wanted to ask you just a couple of more questions to better understand a little bit about who you are and what you bring to the table. So what do you think, in general, are the most effective skills that you have that you would employ as an assembly member to deliver for our communities?
Sure. So it was only 2 semesters, but still having 2 semesters as an educator, I think has taught me a lot, beyond experience I have in government affairs, just in terms of listening and learning and teaching. And I think those are big areas that legislators need to excel in. You have to be able to listen. You have to be able to make people feel heard, and like their thoughts are important, which they are, even when they don't agree with you, they're still important. And you have to be open-minded and you have to be able to teach people. You need to be able to teach your colleagues about the issues that are important to your district and bring it back to your district in that way. And you need to be able to learn from other people. Like I said, you can't possibly know every single thing that you need to know ever. But especially as a legislator, when you're tasked with voting and advocating and supporting for a wider range of issues. And I think that being able to learn from other people is really important. And also transparency. I want people to know where I stand. If I don't know something, I'm going to tell you I don't know it. And I'm open to learning and having those conversations and researching myself. And also I want people to know if I can't support something, why I can't support it. If I do support something, why do I support it? And I think that transparency is often lacking in our government. And I want to bring that back and be someone that people can trust, know that I'm going to deliver results, and also that I'm relatable and I'm someone that you can have a conversation with. I think oftentimes some elected officials feel as though, they're superior, or or they come off that way, or that they're not approachable. And I have always said, I want my member to be someone that'd be like, that's a cool person. I want to hang out with them. Like I want to get to know them and have a fireside chat like this. And that is something that I feel that I bring to the table that way as well. Yeah.
Chloe, it has been a delight speaking to you. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to introduce yourself and also share your views on some of the hot topics of the day. So thank you very much for joining us tonight.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good evening. We will see you
You
on the
too.
campaign trail.
Sure will.
All right. So we're now towards the end of our evening. We have one assembly candidate left. Again, this is AD107. I was told that I did mess it up. There is a small sliver of the town of Chatham up by Kinderhook Lake that is also in the district. So if you live at Kinderhook Lake, talk to us. We'll make sure you know which district you're in. Kent, thank you so much for joining us tonight. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. So why don't we start with an introduction? So why don't you tell the folks of Columbia County who you are and a little bit about your background?
Sure. So my name's Kent Sopris. I am currently a association executive for the Association of Convenience Stores, but I've got about 25 years of policy, public life experience. Starting in the U.S. House of Representatives, I've worked in the New York Assembly, the New York Senate. I ran the Public Transit Bureau for New York State for 5 years. And I've also spent some time working for engineering companies and convenience stores. So I have a wide range of experience when it comes to the government space. I live in Del Mar with my wife and daughter and our 2 dogs. And I think something fun that people just don't know about, or they should know about me, is I'm a big Neil Diamond fan. So if you want to hang out and listen to Neil Diamond and talk some politics, I'm your guy. But I grew up in politics. I learned very early on from my dad, who was involved at the county level in Dutchess County, how important it is to listen to people and to be a representative of people, regardless of party, regardless of whether they even voted for you. And so I'm hoping to take my experience and be a positive force for the 107th.
That's great. I am going to be candid. I'm not a Neil Diamond fan, but I'm also not a foe. So perhaps
That's
you can
okay.
educate.
That's okay.
So I saw in your questionnaire that you worked for the Department of Transportation and were involved with quite a few big projects. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and
Yeah.
maybe talk about how you thought government was effective and maybe some areas where it frustrated you?
Oh, absolutely. That's easy to do. So yeah, I spent 5 years as the director of public transportation for DOT, and under that bureau, we managed the statewide mass assistance operating fund, which is STOA. It's $5 to $6 billion fund, which is direct payments to systems throughout the state, in the big cities, in the rural areas, and in the suburban areas. I also managed federal grants, Section 5311, 5310 grants. Those are grants that go directly to programs that provide services for the elderly or the disabled. And then on the 5311 front, directly to rural areas. And I know that Columbia County and Rensselaer County and Washington, they're all beneficiaries of this program. And, one of the things that I would try to do as a legislator is one, get that information out to some places. I think there's a lot of municipalities, less so, but there's a lot of not-for-profits that don't understand that this money's there. I know this. And I think that when they do know about it, they see the application process and it's daunting. I would have my office be available to these not-for-profits to help walk them through this process. There's also, there's no such thing as free money, and that's true. Even though these are grants, the reporting requirements for some of these places are just onerous for these small not-for-profits. So I would try to figure out, I would work with the department, I would work with the transportation chairs in the Senate and the Assembly to find a way, at least on the state level, with the state reporting, to try to make that a little bit easier for recipients of these funds. But we talk about one of the questions you had was about how to help elderly folks in the district and how to help them get to health services. Well, transportation is the way to do that, and coordinating that transportation and ensuring that there's funds available for this transportation. It used to drive me insane to hear stories about people who just couldn't afford to get from point A to point B, and then they have to go through the hassle of trying to find a car, find payment for it. And I know there are parts of the state that are working on coordinating some of these medical transportation services. And I really do think that there should be some sort of a statewide clearinghouse for that. And the state has worked on that and in the past, and it just never kind of got there. So I would lend my voice into that conversation, and I would work with the appropriate groups, municipalities and the counties to try to figure out what the best path forward, acknowledging it wouldn't be easy, but I think it's something that we need to really look at.
Pete Buttigieg, great Secretary of Transportation or the greatest of all time?
The greatest of all time.
Oh,
I saw him the
excellent.
other day on an interview, and he was talking about how the governor of Florida rejected transportation funds, and he's like, he's the only one who did it, and of course he did it, and it just he says, well, you know what, it's going to go somewhere else, and all I thought was, New York projects.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
a
no,
good way to.
he's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm a fan. So kind of picking up on that same topic, though, about seniors accessing care or other services in rural areas. We've been talking about Columbia Memorial, a rural hospital that struggles. There are others in the district. So how do we help these hospitals and keep them strong in serving our communities?
I think the answer is to take a look at the Medicaid reimbursement process, what the funds are, to increase those funds. I am in Republican conservative circles, Medicaid is this great boogeyman. I disagree. I think Medicaid is a program maybe flawed in some aspects, but it's important. And it's the way to get funds into the hands of these rural areas and these rural programs. And I think, there could be some federal funds available, but I think it's really incumbent on the state to prioritize that. And I have a good working relationship with the current Assembly Health Chair, Amy Paulin, and her office. I would work closely with them to try to find ways to do that. I think also one of the benefits of being a upstate Democrat in this conference is kind of gives you some freedom to make a lot of noise, if you want to. And I would make noise on this space. I think the and it connects to the seniors question. Clearly, I think the answer is to look at Medicaid, find ways to get those funds into the right hands.
We've also talked tonight about the Climate Leadership Protection Act, and it sets an aggressive timeline for us here in New York. So could you speak to the policies that you're going to support or fund if elected to help meet those goals?
Look, the CLCPA was a great and ambitious goal, and it's something that should be lauded. Part of the reason I want to run is to clearly leave a better world for my daughter and for the other kids. And I think the focus of the last two governors and the legislature on this issue has been great. We have a great commissioner at DEC, I think one of the best, who really understands these issues. That being said, like all public policies, you can have the big ideas, but we have to implement them. And I do have some concerns about things like the all-electric transition. Not the end, but the means. We need to take a look at distribution. We need to take a look at generation. Do we have enough? Will there be distribution for all-electric? What will that impact be on the consumer? We are doing a lot of these policies to make lives better, but we got to make sure that we don't put the burden completely on the people who struggle to pay their bills. And so that, the solution could be tax credits. The solution could be, working with, there's the clean, the dirty energy penalty bill. That could be something that could be used to raise money to mitigate some of the costs on working and middle-class people. I would support that. But I do support the goals. I think we shouldn't move the goals. I think moving goals is, I mean, they're goals. That's what we're trying to get to. And I think keeping them in place is the only way that's going to keep people honest and focused on getting these programs off the ground. If you can change the rules halfway through, then why even bother? So I would support that. And quite frankly, we have a very good energy chair in the assembly. I don't know if you've heard. So, I think I would work with her on that and try to come up with ways to protect the consumer, but move forward on very laudable goals.
Same topic. Would you support New York State legislation to prohibit the extraction of methane gas by injecting carbon dioxide into, I don't know how to say the word, but it's basically CO2 fracking.
Right,
what are
CO2
your thoughts?
fracking. Right, yeah, I would support a ban on that. Period. The end.
What is your position on a ban of menthol cigarettes and flavored tobacco products?
Well, I'm sure you know, NIAX, my organization, was heavily involved in that. I don't support a ban on this, and I don't support it for a couple reasons. Bans do nothing in New York State except create a market for illegal products. And there's proof. The proof is the ban on the illegal flavored vapes. They've been banned for 4 years. They're everywhere. I was just on today with actually a tobacco advocate, tobacco-free advocate, and we're going to work together on trying to go after those flavored vapes. So what happens is the state or the whatever entity bans these products. Well, stores like the ones I represent currently won't sell them, but they're being sold somehow. They're being sold illegally. So the enforcement, and this is what I've been working on for the last couple of years, the enforcement of these bans, the enforcement of tobacco control generally, is a mishmash. It's mind-numbing. You know, tax and finance has a piece here, Department of Health has a piece here, but then the county departments of health do their work. And I've come to it, and I like to come to issues and sit back and say, what makes sense here? And what doesn't make sense? And what doesn't make sense to me is that a Department of Health employee inspector can go into a store and find a legal product, and they will fine you, but they won't confiscate the product. So you can go ahead and sell the product. And a lot of these stores, it's just a cost of doing business. So why not go after the product? Let's, if I were an assembly member and could introduce a bill, I would introduce a bill on day one that would give DOH the teeth to confiscate the product. And that's my, why I'm opposed to more bans. I do think that if in terms of, and to flip the question, the work that the state has been doing to lower the smoking rate has been working. And I think more funds, more advertisements, more public education is the way to go. But also just we have to get rid of those illegal stores. We have to. And now they're selling marijuana and cannabis. So it's all become one big gray area, which to me is less gray. I think we have a problem. There's a solution. We should implement it. And it shouldn't just be the state. It should be a county and town and city coordinated effort.
What is your position on the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, as well as the Bigger Better Bottle Bill?
Yeah, so the bottle bill is something I also work on very closely, and I think what we have here in New York State, and to add the EPR in there, we have a recycling problem. The bottle bill for 40 years was intended to get bottles out of the stream, to out of the garbage stream, to recycle them. It's clearly not working the way it's supposed to work. I've been working with redemption centers throughout upstate New York that are going out of business because they can't afford to do it anymore. I would support, before expanding the bill, before expanding the categories, fixing the infrastructure. And I testified at a hearing in the Assembly in the fall on this. And what we need to do is figure out how to keep the current bottles in the system to recycle them from soup to nuts. And And right now there's kind of a mishmash of where you can bring the bottles. And at the end of the day, the redemption centers are actually a pretty good employer for some spots in upstate New York, if they're paid. So I would support a reimbursement increase for them, a handling fee increase. I would support an increase in the redemption fee as well. But before we can expand the bottles to include, juice and liquor bottles, we have to make sure that the actual infrastructure can handle that. And I don't think it can right now. I do think that there is a solution to this, and I think that working with the energy chairs or the environmental chairs, who I know are working very hard on this, is the way to go. I would, at the end of the day, if we could fix the infrastructure, support an expansion. But that also might be something that we do through the EPR. And I know there's a lot of questions right now about whether they go full in on the EPR or they do a bottle bill and then an EPR. I support the EPR. I would clearly, I caution that costs do trickle down to the consumer. And I wouldn't want there to be companies that just say, yeah, I'll do this, and then I'm just going to pass it along to the consumer. We have to make sure that there's protections there and guardrails before a company does that. But I support both with qualifications.
Yes. Do you support the New York Health Act, universal health care in New York State?
I don't know enough about that actual specific bill. I think healthcare is clearly something that has been an issue for my entire life. We had Obamacare and whatnot. I think that is something that is a great idea. I support in theory, but understanding the law, understanding the interest groups involved, I think it would take a lot of effort to implement, and I think that that's possible to do, but it's not something that can just pass. That would be something that an all hands on deck type effort to get passed. But I think it's something to look at, and I think I definitely would spend more time thinking about that.
We got a couple of questions about gun control.
Yep.
One of them was, by your logic about banning menthol cigarettes or some of those things, should we not ban illegal guns?
Mhm.
And then I would just sort of take that to the next question, which is, the rise of gun violence, the proliferation of guns, illegal gun trafficking, what sort of gun control measures would you advocate for as an assembly member?
Sure. So the banning of certain types of guns, I think, can really only occur at the federal level. But again, even at a federal ban, there will be an illegal market. So you've got a couple things there. We have to get the illegal guns off the street. We have to work with law enforcement. We have to work and actually get them off the street, because you can ban a product but you're not going to ban the bad guys. So there's only so much a law can do statewide, I believe. That being said, I would support something like that. It may, I support those efforts. I personally hate guns. If I could pass a bill and be in charge of the world to ban guns, I would. But that being said, I'm not in charge of the world, and people do use guns for hunting and their sport, and I respect that. I think people in distress. I think the red flag law has been somewhat successful over the last couple of years. I think I'd like to see that continue. I think background checks, expand waiting times. I think there are things that we can do to slow down the actual transaction. But when it comes to getting illegal product off the street, I think we have to work with localities and with law enforcement to do that.
Kind of in that same general topic. In 2023, New York passed the Clean Slate Act. What other measures would you support that address problems, discrimination, police brutality, racism in
Mhm.
our criminal justice system?
I think one of the things that I think we should do is clearly, I, I think the prison population is not something that should be ignored. I think I've grown up upstate my entire life. Prisons are a big deal here, but I used to see the families come visit them, and I personally, my faith dictates this, and just my sense of compassion. We need to work with people. I think expanding education programs in prison would be a great thing. I think, and I forget if this actually passed, but I know there's a proposal to allow for TAP grants to be used in the prisons. I would support that. Um, I think jobs programs. You can't expect someone to leave prison and then say, "Well, we're done." I think Clean Slate was a good first start. I think in that same space, there's more to do, and I would be interested in being part of that.
We've talked tonight quite a bit about affordability issues, including children facing food insecurity, families, seniors. How do we address this problem, which is
Yeah.
especially acute in rural areas?
Well, first off, I would support an increase in SNAP benefits. I know they're discussing that right now. I don't know what the status of those conversations are. I think that goes without saying. The state has been trying different pilot programs to allow SNAP to be used in restaurants, which I think is great. I think should be expanded. I don't think we should wait for the pilot to end there. I'm also working at the federal level on getting SNAP expanded to hot food. I talked to colleagues in the legislature, and a lot of them aren't aware of that. You can't use SNAP benefits for hot food. So you can go into a store and buy a cold sandwich. But if they have a hot sandwich, you can't buy that with SNAP. Again, going back to, does this make sense? It doesn't make sense. I think we should work with the in the school nutrition front. I had done a lot of work on behalf of the School Nutrition Association to expand reimbursement to 25 cents. I think one of the best programs that came out of COVID, the best things that came out of COVID was the universal meals. And it was just a horrible thing to see that expire. I don't know why New York hasn't done that completely right now. There should be no debate over that. So I would lend my support to that as well. Additionally, I think transportation, everything seems to come back to transportation and transit. Try to make it more affordable for people to get to different stores, and try to work with grocery stores and convenience stores and try to bring them into food deserts. I think that there's interest on all sides. I think the issue is that no one knows how to really approach the other. And I think that would be a role that a legislator could and should play.
Well, your position with convenience stores is definitely something people have questions about. So how can a New York State government incentivize convenience stores to install more EV charging stations and fewer new gas pumps?
Well, I think they're working on that right now. I know that there are bills in winding their way through the legislature that would require new buildings to have EV charging. With the EV chargers, I think there's a misconception with some convenience stores. They sell gas, so they don't want EV. They actually don't mind that. What they're looking for is the right kind of technology to be available. So right now, you have grants, and the federal government had grants, and you can get an EV charging station put in there and subsidized. But after a couple of years, it's not going to be subsidized, and there's no real cost structure associated. Like, no one really knows how much they should be charging for something. It's not like, you go to from a gallon of gas for $3, now you're going to do, megawatts for whatever. So that still is that's working itself out. I think you will see, and you have seen, some convenience stores of their own volition putting in chargers. Stewart's has been at the forefront of this effort. So really, honestly, it will take, again, somebody to sit down with them and try to walk them through it. I've been part of some of these conversations, but it hasn't been something the state has really seriously looked at, or at least communicated to us. So again, I don't think that that's actually something that you get a lot of opposition from. Again, it doesn't make sense. Is it the right fit? And by that I mean, what kind of chargers are they? Are they level 3? Are they level 1? You know, you want people to be able to still come in to the store, buy some things, come out and move on with their day. So convenience stores are actually very, very nimble businesses. They evolve better than any I've ever seen. So I think they're actually good ones to work with on trying to move forward on these on EVs.
So you've got a wealth of experience both inside and outside of government. And, you know, here we are, we're in the last 5 minutes of our conversation. And you've worked on a ton of different pieces of legislation and policy. So what are you most proud of in the, you know, 2 decades plus of advocacy that you've done that will inform the way you approach your time as an assembly member if you're successful?
Absolutely. So I've already mentioned the DOT work. You know, we manage those multi-billion-dollar programs, the $1 million, $100 million grants, but we actually did that through COVID too. So when COVID happened, we kept the lines of communication open for transit systems. We were there every day, 7 days a week, talking to them, making sure they got paid. We moved the money, and we did this remotely, so everybody was everywhere else, and it was. I felt I was being involved. I felt I was involved, and I thought we did a good job. But when I was worked in the state senate, we actually identified in Nassau County, there was a bunch of constituents who called us up and said our water's brown. And so they would send us samples, and it was brown. So we hauled the water authority in, and they said, no, it's just lead. It's fine. Not lead. It's just discoloration. It's okay. We held the hearing. We got them to really focus on cleaning up the water, and they were able to clean up the water. Through our work. If we didn't do that, they wouldn't have done anything. I've also been involved in it might not sound exciting, but public authorities reform, which is something my boss in the assembly worked on. And it was, you know, how do these shadow governments work? There's thousands of them throughout the state, at the local level, at the state level. And we were able to put in some guardrails there. We were able to put in some reporting requirements that showed where public money went. And you know, it might not be, you know, headline grabbing, but it was the more kind of the work that like really impacted people that I always found the most exciting. And as an assembly member, I would hope to follow up on my boss's legacy there, and really ask the hard questions and kind of be the pain in the side of some of the folks who like the status quo. And that's something I hope to continue.
So my last question, AD107 is a 2B Democratic district. It's currently represented by a Republican, but Joe Biden won it. Won what would have been that district. So how do you bring Democrats and Republicans together in a coalition to win a purpley light blue district like AD107?
Yeah. Well, I think I have to, there's a couple things. I think the issues of 2024 will revolve around choice and democracy. And those are the big things. Will they bring out Republicans? Probably not. It's hard. But then there are issues that I'm going to be focusing on. And I think the issues of mental health and addiction and rural hunger issues can bring people out. You know, I have a large base of support, and quite frankly, you know, we're planning on knocking on doors, and I'm already meeting with groups I think the more I talk to people and really connect with them, I think we can get them out. I think the focus clearly is, trying to run up the score in Columbia County, run up the score in Bethlehem, and it's hand-to-hand combat in Rensselaer County, I think, and that's really what it's going to take. And this is not going to be an easy race against Scott Bendet, even though we have good numbers on our side and we have good trends. I'm not naive to what we'll be facing here. I mean, part of the district is in Elise Stefanik's district, and she's one of the most terrifying people in this country, in my opinion. So it's going to take someone who can stand up to what they're going to throw, and they're professionals at being nasty. So I really think it's getting my message out, showing that I have the experience, and that on day one, I can start to benefit the district and really make a change there. And that's what I'm going to try to hammer away at throughout the next few months.
Well, Kent, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to Columbia County voters. We had the highest Democratic turnout in the state in 2022, and you betcha we're going to do it again in 24 for whomever our candidate is in AD107. So
That's right.
Thank you for taking the time tonight, and I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Well, Democrats, we've got 4 great candidates running for Assembly in 106 and 107. The primary is at the end of June. A lot of campaigning to take place between now and then. Thank you for joining my beautiful fireplace and enjoying my nice sweater I had on for these fireside chats. Have a great night, a great rest of your week, and we'll see you on the campaign trail soon.